Welcome back. The Informer talking to former Police Commissioner in Victoria, Kel Glare. He was part of a terrific team back in 1987 through to 1992. He had some terrific people to succeed, and the terrific people that followed him. I think it was it Miller that you preceded or followed you? Who was it? Mick Miller preceded you.
I followed Mick Miller.
And you were succeeded by Neil Comrie. They were different times, weren't they?
Mick Miller was an absolute icon. He did a tremendous job in re-establishing the credibility of the Victoria Police after a number of inquiries and made them very operationally successful. And I owe him a great debt of gratitude for being able to take over a police force to which he'd been the commissioner for almost 11 years before that. That made life much easier for me. Administratively, there was a lot to be done, and I think we did a lot in relation to that, and that was very rewarding. But then Neil Comrie followed. I have no criticism of Neil, but following that, we had a succession of chief commissioners who were less than successful, shall I say.
And we've arrived at today where we have a government that still wants to get this bill, they call it the Omnibus Bill, up and running. And what are your, you started off in the conversation we had a little earlier in part one of our conversation with you, and you said at the time you were most strong and very determined that they didn't need it and they shouldn't be trying to pass this bill or introduce it in Victoria.
No, if there's any extension required, probably if it was rewritten from the start, the CIA wouldn't have any objection to an extension for, say, 1 month at a time. But there has to be accountability that goes with that. There has to be some opportunity to review the operation of things, how things are going on the ground. And a joint parliamentary committee is surely the way to do that, to take the politics out of the issue. That's the last thing I believe that this government would want. They would hate to relinquish any control over what's happening.
Well, it seems to me that you're on the money there, because instead of choosing during this incredibly disruptive time a cabinet that consisted of all members of the parliament, they've chosen a special cabinet just of the government members, and that's the only one that's meeting and running and looking after Victoria at the moment, which should never be the case.
There's an absolute danger, because it appears their memories are so bad they can't remember who made which decision about anything. That just simply lacks credibility in my mind. I mean, the immediate thought that comes to mind is, people are simply lying. But if their memories are so bad about what they've agreed to and what they haven't agreed to, then it would be dangerous to allow them to make any decisions about what happens with relation to the public.
It reminds me of another time and another person. His name was Alan Bond. He also had a problem with recall, and it got him in jail,
yes,
didn't it?
Alan Bond, yes. It's a marvellous, the medical cures that can be affected by a court decision. You see people going to court and they're debilitated, they can't remember anything, they're very ill and whatever, and if they get a favourable verdict, they make a miraculous medical recovery. That's one of the things I've noticed over the years.
It's fantastic. Lazarus-like, huh?
I think we're going wrong with our medical issues. I mean, the fact of the matter is, if we could put more people before the courts, we could close some of the hospitals, as long as they got a favourable verdict.
Kel, some of the things that have fascinated us over the years, and you've had this extraordinary opportunity. You're 84 years old, is that correct?
82.
82, I'm sorry. What was I doing trying to age you before your time? Now, in those 82 years, I can imagine what you've seen and what you've experienced. Now, as part of the CAA, what are the most important things that we should be addressing as of tomorrow? If we could wave a wand, what would you like to see government and others do that the CAA is very keen to pursue?
I think in relation to policing, we've come a long way with the appointment of Shane Patton as the new Chief Commissioner in Victoria. I think Mr. Patton, Chief Commissioner Patton, has a very good understanding of the fact that policing simply can't operate without the support of the community. And I'm quite sure that his understanding of that will see a lot of changes to the Victoria Police. We'll see them, and there's been an example already. When you see the Chief Commissioner now giving press conferences, he no longer has a government minister or the police minister particularly looking over his shoulder. And that divorcing from close contact with politicians was essential, separation of powers. And that's a step in the right direction. I think you'll see many other steps to return Victoria Police to what was, I think, one of the primary police forces in the English-speaking world. So all that's good.
I think the point that you make about this separation of powers and not having someone hover over your shoulder makes an enormous impact, because in this day and age we ask for leadership, do we not? And we want people to use their experience, their know-how, and put it into effect in their jobs. That's the thing that you would like to see more often, wouldn't you?
Absolutely. And while we're reasonably content with the way we're progressing in relation to policing and our influence on that, the criminal justice system needs a total overhaul. If I take, for example, the serial offenders, in charges of murder, people get life usually with a fairly lenient minimum. I can't recall in all my time seeing anyone, no matter how many prior convictions they have, getting a maximum sentence for any crime. Now, recently, and relatively recently in Victoria, the government increased the penalty for manslaughter from 20 to 25 years as the maximum. I can recall no one in that time getting the maximum sentence, even though some of those people have a long string of prior convictions. We come down to simple burglary. You have people who have had 150 convictions for burglary, and they still don't get the maximum sentence. Now, somewhere along the line, we have to say to those people, look, this is not going to do you any good, but it's going to make the rest of us a lot safer. And this time, because of your prior convictions, you're going to get a maximum sentence. But judges have things like they call sentencing guidelines. And rather than starting at the maximum and working down, that seems to start at the bottom and then go subterranean. And it's just simply not on. The CIA has been saying that judges should be appointed on contract like everyone else. They could be given 5-year terms, and one of their key performance indicators should be whether they are meeting community expectations. And those who don't should simply not have their contracts renewed. There's no reason why judges can't be made more accountable for their decisions.
You know, Kel-Claire, you talk an awful lot of good sense, common sense, and as I'm reminded constantly by my father, my late father, he would say, common sense is not that common. And it's almost shameful that we've reached the stage where it's 2020 and we have a supposedly legal system that is as well looked after and supported as it is, and still unable to make the decisions to keep our community as safe as it possibly can be.
Yeah, the system's broken. There's no question about that. It does need an absolute overhaul. And we come to the control of youth detention, for example. And we're not saying that every young person who offends should be locked up, far from it. We have no objection to people getting a second chance, young people maybe getting even a third chance on occasion. But when you have instances of one young thug at Malmesbury who's, as I understand it, 6'4" in the old and about 160 kilograms and constantly violent day in, day out. And there doesn't seem to be any way of really planning to manage someone like that. Someone like that, despite their age, needs to be in an adult jail where they can be properly controlled. A young guard had a guitar smashed over her head, which nearly scalped her. And yet the penalty for that kind of behaviour, even though it's from someone young, when they constantly offend, is simply inadequate. Adult jail's the only answer for people like that.
Well, as I touched on earlier, you speak an awful lot of good sense, and it's so important that people listen and understand that you're not asking for any more than what people are meant to do, and that is provide good governance, provide good leadership, and provide the sort of common sense that enables us to have a strong police force and a government that's representative of all the people, not just some of the people.
One of our members owns a jewellery business. On his second armed robbery on his place, his manager was pistol whipped by one of the offenders. And ultimately, when those offenders reached court, one got a community corrections order for a violent assault and $100,000 worth of unrecovered jewellery taken, incidentally. Now, community corrections orders have their place, but unfortunately, they're not adequately supervised. So they turn out to be no penalty whatsoever. So again, there's a flaw in the system, because if community corrections orders are to be issued, and they can be and should be on some occasions, they've got to be adequately supervised. And that's just not happening. So the CAA is trying to be an advocate for the great silent majority out there who don't have a voice for themselves. Unfortunately, we are getting a bit of airtime. And I think that we are having some influence. And that's great, because I said the average person doesn't get an opportunity to address the media and raise some of these issues.
Well, that's one of the things that we wanted to address with the arrival of The Informer, and we're very happy to give you the opportunity to talk about these issues and many others, Kilglare. It's important for us always to go to a resource, to a font that's been there and done that and worked at the coalface and understands the many challenges that exist in policing, not only in this state, but in any jurisdiction around the world. Kilglare, and I should say Kilglare AO, we thank you very much for joining us on The Informer. And please, anytime you need any assistance, we're very happy to support you.
Thank you very much. I'm very grateful on behalf of the CAA and myself for the opportunity. Thank you so much.
My pleasure. Kilglare, former police commissioner in Victoria, at a time when they were doing some tremendous reforms from 1987 through to 1992. It's been a joy listening to him and to getting a sense of his outrage when he heard that the Victorian government wanted to introduce the omnibus bill. As far as Kilglare is concerned, they have no right to be calling for it. There's no need for it. And if they want more boots on the ground, they should be bringing more police men and women into the force. Kilglare, thank you very much for joining us.
Pleasure.